remix with the homie. All right. All right, YouTube, let's do this.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Wednesday, August 17th, 2016. Thank you so much for joining us. I know right now, as we are recording and broadcasting live, the Green Party is having their town hall on CNN. But I'll catch the replay and we'll discuss it either late tonight or first thing in the morning and chop it up and make sure we address all of it. So if you're over there watching that right now, I feel you. I got you. It's cool. We still love you. But make sure you catch the replay, which means if you're hearing me actually say that, that means you're already listening to the replay. So anyways, welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I have a great show lined up for you tonight, and it's not one that you want to miss at all. I have two legitimate reasons to discuss Donald Trump tonight. His shakeup in his campaign is worthwhile mentioning because of the signal that it actually sends, which is contradictory to his speech to African Americans, or his speech about African Americans last night, because he was speaking to a predominantly white. I think there was one black person in the background. You could hear it was a black preacher for sure, because Donald Trump said some things, and every now and then in the background you heard somebody yell, "Preach!" So that's certainly one black person in the audience last night. But that was essentially it. But it's worthwhile, not only worthwhile, but it's important. Because I casually dismissed it this morning on social media, but I actually took the time to listen to his speech before the show, and it is worthwhile. It's important for us to dissect his speech because it is it's very deceptive potentially effective. I don't think effective in terms of this election, and I don't think effective in terms of him winning the African-American vote or even getting close. However, that message delivered by someone who's not a shit stick like Donald Trump would work, and it would work to the detriment of the black community. So it's important that I break down that speech and show you how he is using is actually one of his best speeches. The speechwriter for that did a brilliant job in terms of rhetorical devices and propaganda in a sleight of hand. And the number one thing I do on this show is I have the master bullshit radar, so I can smell it a mile away. And his speech last night reeked of bullshit that people would potentially buy into. All right, so I got to dissect that. All right, and then at 9:30, I'm going to be joined by Young Harrington, a.k.a. Larry Website, a.k.a. the name that shall not be mentioned on air. He's going to be joining me along with Emily Robinson. Both of them are heavy hitters in the social media world on Twitter, but more importantly, they're active in the communities and active on the national level with the Democratic Socialists of America. And they're coming on to discuss data that is showing that millennials are rejecting capitalism. So it's an interesting conversation, and I think it's a perfect segue from the conversation on Trump. And I'm going to allow a tweet from Lee Fong of The Intercept to be that bridge that's going to carry us over from the conversation on Trump and everything wrong with what he's proposing or what he's not addressing directly into the conversation with Larry Website and Emily Robinson from DSA. And you'll see it all piece it. I love it when a plan comes together. And I think tonight's going to come together well. You could join the conversation at sundry times, 857-600-05 1-8. The first thing I want to talk about, I don't think it's low-hanging fruit. I think it's worthwhile mentioning. I want to talk about Donald Trump and the shakeup of his campaign, in particular, the executive from Breitbart.com who has come on board as, I believe the official title is chief executive of the campaign. Let me pull up, this is the exact title. And this is important because it sends a significant message in terms of what they're actually going to do. So Trump hired Stephen Bannon, and he is the executive chairman of Breitbart News, LLC. Yeah, and I had it right. Bannon is going to become Trump's chief executive. He's also promoted Kellyanne Conway, who was a senior advisor and pollster to Mike Pence, the VP pick. She is being promoted to quote unquote campaign manager. Paul Manafort is the campaign chairman. He is essentially, he's going to retain the title, but to the people on the inside, it is a significant demotion, basically meaning Manafort is no longer in charge of the campaign. Stephen Bannon is in charge of the campaign. So obviously the spin is that they are calling it an expansion instead of a shakeup. And the reality of it is that it's actually reasonable for them at this point, the Trump campaign at this point, to actually have a shakeup because they're doing so piss poor, pathetic in the polls. They're doing ridiculous in the, I mean, they're past double digits now. They're almost at the 13, 14, 15 points in some states, so much so that in Pennsylvania, Hillary Clinton no longer has to run, or her super PACs no longer have to run ads. They're going dark in Pennsylvania, the super PAC, because she's doing so good against them. So it's not unreasonable for them to have a shakeup, but because of Donald Trump and they're a team of winners, they could never even consider admitting that they had to make changes because they were losing. Instead, they're calling it an expansion because they're winning, and they're winning so big, and they're going to do everything so great. The important thing to know about the shakeup is Stephen Bannon, and I have him on the screen behind me. Stephen Bannon, or Stephen Bannon, depending on who you ask, is an executive from Breitbart, and he is so if you know anything about Breitbart, founded by Andrew Breitbart, who died several years ago, Breitbart has been the premier right-wing rag, clickbait rag. And there's no title that they're not willing to, a situation that they're not willing to exploit, no incorrect title for clickbait that they're not willing to be inflammatory with. There's no limits to really what Breitbart has done, except for something that may be illegal or something that may cause them to legitimately get sued. But Breitbart is the right-wing crown jewel of bigotry. So much so that the Southern Poverty Law Center has begun keeping a file on them. And by file, I mean there's pages on their website documenting the slow descent from just being a bigoted right-wing rag into being the crown jewel of white nationalism, white supremacy, and the alt-right, stirring and fostering Islamophobic fears or Islamophobia. They have pushed the narrative of the incorrect narrative or the intentionally propagandistic narrative of black on white violence and the demise of the white community. They've picked that up and they've run with it. They have gone as far as, and I'll give you an example of their desire. And I think it's beyond just a desire for clicks. I believe that Breitbart has descended into a new audience that drives a massive amount of their revenues, but also one with which they can find some common ground. Because any website, you will accept clicks wherever you get them, but it's who you talk to that ultimately determines who you are. And so this is an example. I don't know if you remember last year or earlier this year, the black news reporter who on air went and shot two of his colleagues, killed two of his colleagues. And during that time, this is the headline that Breitbart ran with. Race murder in Virginia. Black reporter suspected of executing white colleagues on live television. And so this is just kind of an example of the type of headlines that Breitbart uses, but not only the headlines, but the narrative and the audience that they pander to is a very nationalistic, xenophobic, nativist audience. And so if Breitbart, with Andrew Breitbart, started off as a horrible place, they have descended into the seventh level of hell, right? The seventh circle of hell. You know, they have devolved into something far more, in my opinion, insidious than what Andrew Breitbart started, which itself was disgusting. So much so that former employees of Breitbart are saying that if Andrew Breitbart saw what it has become, he'd roll over in his grave. I don't know. I don't know that if Breitbart would turn over in his grave, because I think, you know, he may just not have had the nerve to go as far as they're going now. He might actually be pleased, because it's not as though Breitbart has ever been this place of journalistic integrity, this place of high conservative values, and trying to argue conservatism from a philosophical and a political perspective. They have always been the filth cesspool of the internet that wasn't the actual sewage center of the internet. They were always one step above. They were always reputable enough to be mentioned and to have press credentials, but they were just one sneeze away from being a neo-Nazi website. And in fact, a lot of people are positing that Breitbart is becoming that central location, that mainstream. They're becoming the Donald Trump. What Donald Trump is to the Republican Party. Yes, the Republican Party has been this shitty, and played to these dog whistles forever. Donald Trump is the bastard child of all the dog whistles that they've been playing to over the last 40 years. That's exactly what this iteration of Breitbart and their CEO, not the CEO, but one of their top executives, Stephen Bannon, this is what they have become. So I put all that out there in context of Donald Trump's campaign, because Bannon is viewed as the worst of Breitbart. The reason Breitbart has gone from being, you know, nefarious to insidious, right? They've gone from being, you know, junk to being shit, you know, morally and ethically speaking. But Bannon is the driving force behind this, so much so that it's almost like ISIS. Remember when Al-Qaeda said ISIS was too much for them and ISIS was too radical? That's essentially, it's an extreme hyperbolic, over the top example, right? But it's exactly when you have people come back and say, whoa, Breitbart has gone too far. I'm like, really? Because Breitbart has been going far for a long time. They've been kind of disgusting for a very long time. If you see their track record, they've been pretty disgusting. And so for you to now say, oh, this is too much, means that, okay, maybe it is, but it's not like you're going from being a noble cause to being something disgusting. You're going from being something disgusting to be even more disgusting. And so a lot of people are looking at this hire by Donald Trump and the kind of character that Bannon is and the baggage that he brings and what he did at Breitbart. And they're interpreting this as saying there's nothing off limits for Donald Trump anymore. There's nothing he's not going to be willing to say, because now he has somebody in his corner that's going to empower everything that he wants to say, that's going to push him even further into the alt-right direction, that's going to double down on the nativism and the white supremacy and the white nationalism dog whistles and outright overt messaging, right? He has somebody who believes the bullshit that he's been pandering. And so with this hire, it really signals a potential, right? Maybe this guy, maybe Bannon comes in and says, we want to win. And because we want to win, we're going to cut all of the bigotry, because even though we're just going to wink, I can't even wink. You see my eyes get messed up. I can't really wink. We're just going to wink to the white supremacists because we've already got them. So now let's clean up our act and let's do everything right to get this victory. It's very possible that he's going to go in there and do that. But at the same time, his track record says he's going to double down on Donald Trump's bigotry. Which really brings me to Donald Trump's speech last night, because if you listen to his speech, he had the overtones of wanting to combat racism, nationalism, white supremacy, and make things better for African Americans. But his hire says the exact opposite because of what Bannon has done historically. All right, so before I talk about that, let's take this caller. Caller, you are live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Benjamin, this is Steve out in Washington. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure, Steve. What's on your mind, man?
The reason I think he hired the Breitbart guy is I think they're misinformed about what they think America is like. They're going to get 38% of Americans to vote for them, but I think that's it. I don't think they're going to go any higher than that. But in their heads, I think that they think there's more voters out there to court by going this extreme route and by going this route that, you know, Breitbart and the whole spin machine has done for the last 20 years. But I don't think it's, I think they actually genuinely think this is going to work to keep going the way he's been going for the whole campaign. So that's my comment.
Which is insane to me, because the polling is telling them the exact opposite, which is, oh, thank you for saying that. I was getting ready to skip over the best clip of the day. Hey, thanks so much for the call, man, because you reminded me of this clip from earlier today where they are absolutely ignoring reality. Listen to this clip.
And Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. So this change, this shakeup, is this a sign that Donald Trump...
I got to stop you for 1 second, because there's no shakeup. I mean, look at the words that you use and you blast at the bottom in your banner. Shakeup, overhaul, dramatic, desperate measures. There are no desperate measures. You just literally read the memo that you received that Paul Manafort sent out stating he's not going anywhere. The campaign is on its way to victory, and yet you still use these ridiculous words in order to incite something. Yeah. I mean, please understand that nobody's buying into this anymore.
Really?
It started out, I don't know if you think it was funny, but these terms are not indicative of what's going on at the campaign. All that Mr. Trump has done is he has added to the existing group of winners that he has hired for the campaign, which is still hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
All right, that's enough of that particular clip. All right, so I had to get that portion in where he said, I only played that first portion because I wanted you to hear the delusion that's happening. That's Michael Cohen. He's the executive vice president of the Donald Trump campaign, and he's his executive counsel, or a special counsel to Donald Trump. And I'll mention him again a little bit later, but look at the delusion, right? He said that we are adding to our team of winners and we're just expanding the winners. All right, here's the next clip. This is the only clip that really matters. Listen in.
All right, well, let me ask you about this. So you say it's not a shakeup, but you guys are down. And it makes sense that there would...
Says who?
Most of them. All of them?
Says who?
Polls. I just told you. I answered your question.
Okay. Which polls?
All of them.
Okay. And your question is?
Okay, so my question is, I don't think it is really surprising when facing a challenge and trying to make a turnaround that there would be some, let's at least say some adjustment.
Okay, I'm sorry. This dude, this is one of my favorite clips in media history, man, because he's like, says who? She's like, you're down, you're losing. Says who? Polls. Then the best and the most awkward silence in history. And then he just says again, because he can't bring himself to acknowledge that what she said is right, but he can't, he's dealing with so much hubris that he can't allow that statement, true statement, to be unchallenged, but he can't challenge it with data. So he just says who? Like he's going to get her to back down. Like, come on, man, seriously?
You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
It's the worst example of delusion that I've seen, and the best moment in media in a long time. That was insane. But this shows you, right? This shows you that maybe they aren't dealing with a full set of marbles in terms of making decisions over there, because, you know, this mindset that Michael Cohen went onto CNN with, you know, that shows me that they're dealing with more. And again, now, the reason it's worthwhile talking about is because they genuinely think they're going to win. That's what this interview, and this is what we've been trying to figure out for a while, right? Are they really trying to win? Or are they just bullshitting? And they're, you know, here to sandbag for Hillary Clinton. But in reality, if you look at the hubris and you look at the arrogance of that particular interview and all the other surrogates that Donald Trump sends out, they actually think they're going to win. And because they actually think they're going to win, it is worthwhile taking a look at some of their policies. All right. So I have to play this next clip, and may run a little bit late getting with Larry and Emily because I have to break this apart. But this is Donald Trump's big speech to the African and American community, and people are celebrating this. And when I say people, I mean white people who are clueless and black people who are clueless, who really have drank the Donald Trump Kool-Aid. They are heralding this as the reason why every African American should vote for Donald Trump. Listen in.
I'm asking for the vote of every African American citizen struggling in our country today who wants a different and much better future. It's time for our society to address some honest and very, very difficult truths. The Democratic Party has failed and betrayed the African American community. Democratic crime policies, education policies, and economic policies have produced only more crime, more broken homes, and more poverty. The African American community has been taken for granted for decades by the Democratic Party, and look how they're doing. It's time to break with the failures of the past. I want to offer Americans a new and much better future. It's time for rule by the people, not rule for the special interests which we have right now.
It's worthwhile. Listen in a little longer.
To every voter in Milwaukee, to every voter living in the inner city, or every forgotten stretch of our society, I'm running to offer you a much better future, a much better job, and a much higher wage. The Democratic Party has taken the votes of African Americans for granted. They've just assumed they'll get your support and done nothing in return for it. They've taken advantage of the African American citizen. It's time to give the Democrats some competition for these votes, and it's time to rebuild the inner cities of America and to reject the failed leadership of a rigged political system. And that's what it is. It's a rigged system.
All right. All right. So that's just the first part. And listen, it's worth shit, that's a great speech because it mixes just enough truth. Okay, let me preface this by saying it's Donald Trump, so chances are it doesn't mean shit in terms of electorally. However, you take that same exact speech in 2020 and you wrap it up in somebody like Marco Rubio or whoever the black Republican they can get to run, and you have a very significant challenge to the Democratic Party. Now, we may still have some taste in our mouth from how xenophobic and how racist this particular iteration of the Republican Party is. So I'm not sure how soon this will be effective. However, whenever we get past this moment of the extreme racism on display of the Republican Party, what Donald Trump is saying right here is an effective tool to place a wedge between the Democratic Party and the black community, because there are enough black people who are disgruntled and disillusioned with the Democratic Party. Because this is the truthful part. What he's saying here about the Democratic Party taking advantage of the black community is absolutely true. I don't think anybody can challenge that. And I would love for anyone from the black firewall to please come and challenge that, because you cannot show me where the Democratic Party has moved purposefully in favor of the black community over the last 30 some odd years. That portion of what he said is true. What he is not saying is the same reason the Democratic Party has screwed the black community is the same reason the Republican Party, if they were in charge, would still screw the black community and probably screw us at a faster pace. You know, you're getting banged by the Democratic. Oh, God, I just went there. The Republicans are just going to come in at a faster pace and screw us much faster with their hyper laissez-faire or attempt to get to laissez-faire capitalism and the deindustrialization of our communities and the outsourcing of labor jobs that used to keep money in the black community. And you look at cities and they blame the Democratic Party for cities like Detroit. Yes, Democrats are partly responsible for Detroit, but what's more responsible is the overall economic paradigm to which both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are loyal. So he's mixing just enough truth to identify the reality that, yes, we have been screwed by the Democratic Party, but he's not going to mention that his so-called solutions are just a furtherance and will further exacerbate what's happening in the black communities. And what I'm trying to tell you is because speakers and good speech writers have the ability to say everything that you want to hear that is true and leave out the portion that is also true that is going to screw you and that's going to hurt you even more, even quicker. And so simply put, the Democrats have screwed us, but the Republicans sure as hell ain't the damn answer. Let's listen to the next part. Let's see if I have this triggered right.
I'm running to listen to your voice, to hear the cries for help from so many people in our nation. The quiet voices in our society, not the loudest demonstrators,
right there,
need to have their demands heard.
Right there. All right. So now he's shifting gears, right? Because he's not talking to a black audience. He's talking to a predominantly white audience. And so he's going to start pretending a little bit later that he actually gives a damn about the plight of the black community. But you're going to see how he seamlessly equates protesters with rioters and people who would speak out against police brutality as violent people and rioters. And so he's simultaneously saying a lot of true things about how screwed up the Democratic Party is, but he's also still pandering to the white nationalists in his audience, both there in that auditorium and listening across the nation. All right, let's keep going.
We reject the bigotry of Hillary Clinton, which panders to and talks down to communities of color and sees them only as votes. That's all they care about, not as individual human beings worthy of a better future. They have taken advantage. Hillary Clinton-backed policies are responsible for the problems in the inner cities today, and a vote for her is a vote for another generation of poverty, high crime, and lost opportunities.
Okay.
I care too much about my country to let this happen.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so poverty, high crime, and lost opportunity. Hillary Clinton's policies are responsible for that. I don't disagree. It's not Hillary Clinton by herself. It's not the Democratic Party by itself. It is American capitalism 101. It is what happens when you gut a community of jobs and leave them in abject poverty, and you leave them there with 50% unemployment, not because, listen, the reason there is 50% unemployment, Republicans are going to try to convince you that it's because taxes are too high and we need to cut taxes so that we can stimulate economic growth. Not little do they know, but what they're not going to tell you is that doing that is going to race us to the bottom even quicker and further exacerbate the problems of poverty. Right? So their solution is actually going to screw us even faster. Yes, Detroit has been run by by Democrats, right? Yes, Baltimore has been run by Democrats. But the policies that they have been employing are neoliberal economic policies that have been screwing not just black people, but poor people in every category, racial category. And I don't think Donald Trump actually puts two and two together, but his speechwriters sure as hell know exactly what they're doing. Because again, they're giving you just enough to believe what he's saying and then not mentioning everything else that comes with it. Because as they gut taxes, if we take the macro level and bring it to the local level, if we gut taxes on the local level, then we're going to be robbing that community of vital resources to rebuild itself. If you lowered property taxes, which most people want, but you're going to be affecting communities that need those property taxes for schools. And how are you going to ever break that cycle? And so, I mean, first and foremost, is so long as our education system is tied to property taxes, you're going to always have great disparity in black communities. Because, not just because of racism, but because of economics. All right, a couple more clicks and clips, and you'll see why this is leading directly into the conversation on democratic socialism of America. Listen in.
First, on immigration. No community in this country has been hurt worse by Hillary Clinton's immigration and all of her policies than the African American community. And she considers them a guaranteed vote. Now she is proposing
there's the
to
one black
print
guy.
Instant work permits for millions of illegal immigrants to come in and take everybody's job, including low-income African Americans. Not right. Not gonna happen.
Yeah. Okay, so here's his solution. This is his first solution, right? His first solution is, let's look at the immigrants who are going to take your low-paying jobs. He's trying to unify black people with the xenophobic and the nationalist tendencies of the Republican Party. So if he can get us to agree to hate immigrants, then we will ignore the stuff that we hate about each other or the unresolved differences that we have between. So, I might not like black people, but I sure as hell hate the Mexicans more. That kind of shit. And again, I don't think this is going to be 1% effective, maybe 1 percentage point effective in this election because of how ridiculous Donald Trump is. But I want to admonish you that this exact speech wrapped up in a different Republican would be hell of effective because of the failings of the Democratic Party. And the reason I'm concerned about that is because if the solution is to the left, the last thing we need to do is allow propaganda to push the black community and America further to the right. A few more clips, and then I'm bringing on my guest. Can I get that to play?
I will fight to ensure that every American is...
Okay, let's try that again. You'll fight to do what?
I will fight to ensure that every American is treated equally, protected equally, and honored equally. We will reject bigotry and hatred and oppression in all of its many ugly forms and seek a new future of security, prosperity, and opportunity. A future built on our common culture and values as one American people.
Okay. I'm almost running too late to actually unpack that line, but because what he's really trying to do is to make it seem like we have such great commonality in this single identity of America. The problem is that for that to happen, there has to be a great erasure of the uniquenesses and the history and the struggle and the plight and the identity of black people. But you probably already knew that. This is the last clip. I want to play this, and then I'm going to bring my guest on.
Our job is to make life more comfortable for the African-American parent who wants their kids to be able to safely walk the streets and walk to school, or the senior citizen waiting for a bus, or the young child walking home from school. For every one violent protester, there are 100 moms and dads and kids on the same city block who just want to be able to sleep safely at night. They want safety.
All right. That's
we
enough.
are going to put students and parents first.
All right. That's enough. Okay. So that's his ploy. That's his plot, right? That's what he's doing. He is trying to convince us that because Democrats have failed us, and they have, that Republicans are the solution. And at the same time, he's trying to convince us that that he's trying to convince his audience that we're going to still be the law and order party. We're still going to make sure that we address the loud protesters and the violent protesters. And then he wants us to whitewash our blackness, our black heritage, and our uniquenesses, and focus solely on that unified American identity, which I'm like, what the hell is that? What the fuck is a unified American identity, right? And then last but not least, he wants to do that all around the fact that we should all hate immigrants because immigrants are coming to take our jobs. Again, Donald Trump is a buffoon. I think this might get him 1 percentage point. He might go from 2% of the black community to 3%. But if you wrap this exact same message in a Marco Rubio in 2020 with the failings of the Democratic Party and the problems of the Democratic Party and the problems of Hillary Clinton, you would see a shift to the right. And that's super problematic and worrisome to me because the solutions are to the left, which is why I'm bringing some guests on here. I think I have them both on the line. Before I do that, I want to put on the screen these tweets from Lee Fong.
And Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. So this change, this shakeup, is this?
This is what I want. All right, so this is a quote, a tweet from Lee Fong of The Intercept. He said, now that everyone discusses recent criminal justice history, why isn't deindustrialization mentioned in tandem with the war on drugs? Next, he says, cities like Baltimore, Milwaukee, and Oakland provided high-paying union jobs for African Americans before trade industrial policies changed. And that's the crux of it, ladies and gentlemen. The fact of the matter is, whatever solution someone is going to propose to us absolutely must include addressing the deindustrialization of our communities. And you can't address that unless you address globalization and the manner in which we play capitalism. Which brings me to my guests tonight who have been patient. Thanks for being on hold for it feels like a long time. I'm bringing on the phone now Emily. Hang on, let me make sure I get the titles right because I like to call people by the right. Okay, so it's Larry Website, aka Young Harrington, aka the name that shall not be mentioned on air, and Emily Robinson, both of DSA, Democratic Socialist of America. How are you two doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having us on.
My pleasure. And do I have, just to be sure, let me make sure I have Larry. Are you there also? Okay, it doesn't sound like I have Larry, but Emily, we're going to start with you while I figure out what's going on with, well, it says Larry is here, so let me just check again to, maybe I need to disconnect Larry and connect Larry again. Hold on, let's try that. We're going to try that, and we're going to call Larry.
All right.
And I'm doing my very best to keep saying Larry and not say the other name. Hold on a second.
The elusive Larry website.
Yeah, exactly. So let's call Larry real quick, see if I can get him on the line. And there's his music, so I hear his hold music. All right, let's see, Larry, we're merging you. Larry, are you there?
Larry, are you there?
Okay.
Okay.
I hear more feedback. Okay, so I don't quite have Larry. I'll try Larry again in a minute. So Emily, right now it's you and me. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, and I'm going to keep trying while I have him and have you. But first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, I follow you, and I know probably a lot of my listeners probably follow you as well. But tell us about yourself and DSA.
Right. So I am a recent DSA recruit, actually, thanks to Larry. And I've only been involved for a couple months now, but I got into sort of left politics through Bernie Sanders, right? So, like, this is the first time, you get Bernie Sanders and you get this candidate who's for the first time talking about how capitalism is failing people. And, you grow up, in America or in American cultures overseas, and you kind of hear this, capitalism is the gold standard. This is what you get. And then for the first time to have someone like Bernie Sanders go, well, actually, there are better options out there. It was sort of like like an enlightenment moment, like a ding moment. And then, you get in, for me, it was through Twitter. I first found out about DSA through Larry, and I was just really, really impressed with the message that they had. We've seen a lot of focus, especially from the socialist left, on intersectionality. And, we just recently endorsed the movement for Black Lives, which, it's almost counter to this narrative of like, oh, well, socialists are like boring white guys, and we shouldn't listen to them because they're white dudes and they have no idea what they're talking about. But like, actually, the socialist left is super, super diverse. And I think that's, one of those underrated things that really drew me to the left political spectrum in general.
Okay. And now, if I'm not mistaken, and you don't have to disclose completely on air, but you're definitely, obviously, a millennial, right? Because even I'm a millennial, right? But you're pretty young. What age group are you in?
So I just turned 18.
Wow.
I start college as a freshman in 20 days, actually. So
Wow.
I am at the back end of the millennials.
And the reason I bring that up is because listening to you talk online and listening to other people, I know Larry is young, and we're going to get him in here. I'm chatting with him on Twitter, trying to figure out how we can get him in on the conversation. But listening to you and to other people, and I'm finding out more and more that the younger generation is not only rejecting capitalism, but you guys are prepared for this, right? You guys are equipped with the knowledge, with the data, with the experiences, with the anecdotes, as well as the delivery to combat this. And in a lot of ways, I feel like it's the younger generation that's going to lead the charge. Tell me a little bit more about your evolution into what you've become, because in a lot of ways, at least on the social media realm, and then now joining up with DSA, you're emerging into a leading voice that can help lead this charge. Tell me more about that evolution.
Well, so one of the things, and it sounds a little vapid, like the, New York Times trend piece millennials that like, oh, they spend all their time online. But I think that's a really valid and really important thing. Personally for me, I never would have found out that there was a world outside of like, your West Wing theme song politics if it hadn't been for, things like Twitter or Facebook. And so I think millennials and the generation just below my generation, we grew up as digital natives, and so we have sort of this, I guess this perspective that we are so much more used to different stories, right?
Yeah.
So like where our parents' generations would go out and play on this, like in the cul-de-sac or whatever, with just the kids that lived in their neighborhood, we go online and we play with people from like all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get sort of like this, I hear about things that are happening in South Africa, or I hear about things that are happening in Beijing, and it opens your eyes up to a lot of the world that you wouldn't otherwise see.
Yeah.
And one of those things that it opens your eyes up to are the realities of, the political system that we have in America. And so, you get all this information about, well, what's happening like with blight in Detroit. Yeah. Or what's happening in California. And you start to be able to make your own choices about the politics that you subscribe to in a way that you really didn't before. And so Twitter provides this platform for people who otherwise wouldn't necessarily have the privilege or the economic backing to have a platform.
Absolutely.
And then suddenly you get like all these great left voices who are like shooting out 140 character bites that are, in a way life-changing. Like, oh my God, I never would have thought of politics in this way if it hadn't been for like this one stupid tweet.
Yeah. No, listen, it is so much more than what people actually give it credit for, because it has created a community that allows us to have that camaraderie and that interaction, the necessary interactions that allow us to create synergies. And I know that's kind of cliche, but that's really what it is. It's creating synergies where we can feed off of each other, and the ideas become bigger, and the speed with which we engage in those ideas and that information flows is moving at such a faster pace. Now, I just ran my mouth long enough to try to get Larry connected again. Larry, are you there? Oh, man,
I'm here.
Oh, we got you. Larry website, ladies and gentlemen. If I had an applause track, I would drop it right there, but I don't have it tonight. Larry, I have been speaking with Emily, and the reason I brought both of you on is because you presented me, you talked to me a little bit earlier today about the fact that millennials are two things. One, rejecting capitalism, which is a big concept and a big conversation that probably requires at least a dissertation or two, right? But we're gonna give it a radio level treatment. That's number one. But then two, millennials are rejecting the Democratic Party in a lot of ways. In this election, we rejected Hillary Clinton and overwhelmingly have been going after Bernie Sanders. And I'm pulling up on my screen for people watching on YouTube that the Democratic Party primary voters under 30, compared to Obama in 2008, Bernie Sanders got 13 points more in about 20 states that Bernie Sanders outperformed Barack Obama in millennials under 30 years old. Talk to me a little bit more about that phenomenon that you've been seeing and how you feel that's connected to DSA.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Ben, it's good to talk to you again. If you look at the numbers, Bernie didn't just beat Obama's youth record, which was talked about very frequently. He demolished his record. And even if you were to look at a state like North Carolina, where we lost pretty badly, Bernie still took 72% of the youth vote. And if you look at Clinton's total vote number, she only got a total accumulation of under 10% of her votes came from young people, where for us, it accumulated a block of roughly 25%. And even when the going got rough for our campaign, after Pennsylvania and New York, you could see that things were not looking great. But still, young people showed up, and we rallied, and we won Indiana, and we won West Virginia, and then we took the fight to California, which didn't go the way that we wanted to, but, young people didn't stop fighting until the very end.
And not only did you guys not, I mean, technically I'm a millennial, but I'm at the very beginning of the millennial. Like I'm right there at the mark. And Emily, you're right there at the end, right? So we have a full generation on this show today. But so not only did millennials fight like hell, but the numbers, it really looks as though the future belongs to a more left-leaning politics, as well as an economic structure. I would like for one of you to speak to that. What is the future looking like economically in terms of ideology of the millennials?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it. There was a Harvard survey done a couple months ago that polled people under 30 and found that the majority of young people don't support capitalism, and that there's a significant percent that supports socialism, and then there's an in-between. And I think the work of groups like DSA is to pull that other, sliver our way and show them what the benefits of socialism and democratic socialism is, and that, especially for us, we know that democracy is about a lot more than just casting a vote. It's about direct action and constant organization and communication with everybody around us.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's drill down in that, right? Let's dig a little deeper, right? So we're moving to the left generationally, right? I think personally, to me, looking at Hillary Clinton, I think this is the last hurrah of the centrist DLC Democrat. And thank God, right? If we have to suffer through it for a couple of years, so be it. I believe it's signaling the end. It's like the death pangs of this centrist triangulating version of the Democratic Party. The millennial vote is showing us that it's shifting to the left. What does that look like in terms of policy, both domestic policy, economic policy, and even speak to the way that DSA is addressing it, racial policy and intersectionality? What does that actually look like?
You want me to start first, Sam?
Yeah, and then
go ahead.
Yeah, and then circle around.
Yeah, no worries. So, basically, DSA's main focus right now is racial justice and intersectionality. And I know a lot of people think that socialists don't center either of them, but that's what we center our strategy on. Just 2 weeks ago, we endorsed the Movement for Black Lives platform, and that's going to be one of our key organizing. We're going to be organizing specifically around that. And we know that mass mobilization of working class people is going to include a lot of people of color, and we're not going to be able to build a viable, alternative or do entryism within the Democratic Party if we don't mobilize those bases. So for us, just DSA has historically had an older membership, but now we're averaging over 200 members a month, and our membership rate has quadrupled. So I think, the triangulation you were talking about and the Clintonism, we've lived this life our whole entire life, and it's just not that great. We know that we can do a lot better than this, and we deserve better than it, to be honest. The Obama years that they say are so great have been pretty shitty for young people. We've been in a great recession, ever since I finished high school. Employment rates aren't great for young people, and it's don't see anything really significantly improving. So establishing a really strong social welfare state, radical action on climate change, uniting an inter-left movement against Clinton's foreign policy. There's a lot of work we have to do, and I think everybody needs to realize that.
Jump in there, Emily, and talk about it from any perspective, whether it's the foreign policy changes that you would like to see, economic changes that you would like to see, and if you don't mind, speak also on the movement, the intersectional portion of the movement.
Right. And so I think one of the really important things that we're starting to see now is that, young people in general are getting a more global worldview. And I know that kind of is redundant, but, before it used to be a very American-centric worldview, especially with anti-war activists in the 2000s against the Iraq War. It was all about America's place in the world versus, like, humanity's place in the world.
Right.
And I think if you look at sort of like the leftward trend of not just American millennials, but millennials in general, like if you look over across the pond with Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, you sort of start to see not only like a social leftward trend, but also an economic one, which I think is really just like, you can't have, successful socialism if it's not global, right? So like if anyone is oppressed, everyone is oppressed. And I think that's sort of like one of the really exciting things that we're really starting to see this year. And it sort of reminds me of, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, how, Black Lives Matter UK shut down one of the major thoroughfares going into Heathrow Airport, which is like the busiest airport in the world. And so, to sort of start to see this international cooperation and this general sort of excitement about taking back, a political system, whether it's, national or global, that has really, for the most part, worked against us for the longest time. And I guess, like, in sort of the really optimistic sense, it's like you have, this really wonderful base of intersectional politics. It's a discussion that we're having everywhere now, and I think it's so critical that we continue to have that discussion. But if we also include, not just speaking about, gay lives and Black lives and Hispanic lives and immigrant lives, but also talking about the economic factors that play into why we have these systems of oppression. And I think, DSA is really, taking a great step in the right direction by saying, look, we can link these things. Black people can never have, the freedom and the justice they deserve if they're still oppressed under a capitalist system. And, I think if you look at that globally as well, we can't have a world that, the world that we deserve, like Larry said, if we don't have, freedom from drone strikes in Syria, or if we don't have, free movement of people from, war-torn countries, war-torn because of American imperialism, right. Between Syria, Turkey, Europe. And I think, even if it's just a small step, like saying, all right, we stand with Black Lives Matter, I think it's the right step. And I think it's just so critical that we continue to make those steps.
Awesome. Listen, so we started late, and if with your permission, I'd like to go a little bit longer because I want to drill down and ask some questions that, one, I'm getting some questions from our audience, and then two, I want to just kind of play the devil's advocate and about socialism and the concept of rejecting capitalism. How does that sound? You guys have a few extra minutes?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right, great. Just let me know when you have to go. Let's do 5 to 10 more minutes. All right. So we'll do the questions from the audience first, and then we'll get into my questions. And you guys know I love you. So if it seems like I'm being an asshole, it's only because I want to flesh it out for people who may not know any better. But from the audience, from JP Rankin, he wants to know: do you plan to lead millennials from behind the screen and into the streets? What's the plan to get them from behind the internet, from behind Twitter, and into the streets?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tackle this. People are, DSA, our YDS chapters are very active with young people, and something that we never really planned for, and it's worth emphasizing. There's a second split of the millennials coming very soon that nobody's talking about, and that's Emily's generation, which is Gen Z. And something we've seen a huge upsurge of is high school students forming YDS chapters, so our youth branch, but people that are even much younger than me, so people that are 15, 16 years old that have 2-3 years of organizing in a, explicitly socialist organization. And they can't even vote yet, but they have just incredible amounts of workplace organizing and, interleft organizing that will go a long way in the future. And I can't even really remember what the question was. I just started rambling.
No, how do we get, and Emily, if you want to jump in on it, but there's a lot of questions here. I might want to give you a separate one. But the question was, what's the plan to get from behind the screens, in front of the screens, and in the streets rather? And for what I'm hearing is that it's kind of happening organically, even in the high school level, where clubs are organizing and people are actually organizing in person versus just online. Yeah. Okay, so let me jump to this next question here. This was a low-hanging fruit, maybe. Let me just ask this anyway. How can we protest capitalism when we use phones and products from capitalism? Who wants that one?
All right, I'll take this one.
Okay, go.
So I love this because I think it tends to conflate like socialism and Ludditism, which is like a wonderful world that like we wouldn't use any capitalist technology at all. But I think that mindset is totally the wrong mindset. Like, keep your iPhone, acknowledge that it's terrible that it was made by slave labor, and acknowledge all of the problematic issues involved in like exploiting labor to get these products, but use them for your advantage, right? So, like, use your phone, get out there, figure out where your local socialist group is, figure out where, like, get on Twitter, man, like, network on Twitter. That's the best place ever. You know, call your friends up, text them, right? It's like an after-school special, like, activism thing. Like, use what you have to your advantage, you know, acknowledge the issues that got them in your hands, like your phone, but, like, don't let sort of, like, these sticks in the mud get you down. Like, keep going.
So let me unpack that question a little
I'll
further.
jump in on this.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Larry.
So also, this plays into a very capitalist worldview, looking at it through this angle, because people ask the same question about poor folks, you know, that why do you have an iPhone? And when they see someone at Walmart, but, you know, the iPhones aren't that expensive, and why don't the poor deserve the best? Why can't we have better things? You know, we can have these things, and it's just a lie that all of us can't have decent things, and that, you know, so many have to. If you were to look at rent compared to the price of an iPhone, you know, the iPhone isn't what's keeping someone down.
Right.
It's that they can buy access into things that really actually matter.
I'm sorry, did you say look at the price of rent compared to the price of the iPhone? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and things like healthcare, you know, the iPhone that costs $100 isn't what's keeping someone down, and it's not a bad economic choice on their part.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
it's for my age bracket, it's childcare. It's the sharecropping that experience where you go to work 40 hours a week just to hand it over to childcare providers. So, and then living expenses on top of that. But I want to unpack that question a little further though, right? So in that question is the premise that socialism is counter or is antithetical to a market system that produces technologies that we're using now. And so maybe we should give them a clearer definition of what we mean when we say socialism. Are we saying and more specifically, rejecting capitalism? Are we rejecting the organizing of labor and capital that produces these technologies and are we replacing it with something that could organize labor and capital so that we can produce similar technologies? Because if we're not going to do that, then we're advocating for a system that could not produce the very same technologies we're using to fight against that system. It becomes almost like a paradox. Who wants that?
Who wants me to? Yeah, I mean, I can jump in a little bit. So these are really big questions, right? And we're not even close to getting to those questions. And these are questions that ESA addresses at meetings. You know, we can have the big discussions about socialist realism versus futurism and all of these kinds of things. But in the meantime, we have to make some steps to climb that ladder a little bit. We're a long way away from completely overthrowing the system, and we're going to have to take little victories in the meantime. It's going to take maybe by the generation after this generation, we could completely overthrow the capitalist class and system. But we also have to have that futurism, you know, what we actually want. And that's something that communicating to people, but also organizing for a better world. In the process, you learn about what you actually want.
Yeah. Okay. So
right,
actually,
and I think like
go ahead, Em. Go ahead.
No, so I just think there's a lot of different. There are many branches of socialism, right? So there's like market socialism, which isn't really my favorite, but there are a variety of different branches of socialism and of ways that you can implement socialism, and not all of them are necessarily like as openly antithetical, like you said, to, you know, the creation or entrepreneurship, really. So you can still have a socialist society that praises entrepreneurship, but you can do it in a way that doesn't also praise or require exploitation.
Damn it! I wish I had an applause track. I've been talking about getting my applause track, but I want everyone in the audience right now to give Emily a hand, because that's the answer for me, right? And that undoes the premise of that question, which is the idea that you cannot organize for production through socialism, and it's only something that we can do through capitalism, which is 100% untrue. I have a couple of other pretty good questions from my audience. Go ahead, Larry. Sound like you were jumping.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's worth emphasizing how much money a lot of these, you know, self-proclaimed entrepreneurs get from the government to do their kind of research, and then also how much technology they're taking straight from, you know, government-funded research. So it's not like this is separated, you know. A lot of what they're using is coming from publicly subsidized research. And then even further than that, you know, if you were to look at the Scandinavian countries, you know, if you're going to have exploitative systems, they funded a social security system and a retirement plan with, you know, nationalized oil system, and now they can benefit from that. You know, you can make it work both ways. Not that it needs to be exploitative, but you can also establish stronger social welfare systems halfway.
Yeah, no, these are thank you for those responses. Those are good responses, and even your first response, Larry. I don't want us to kind of gloss over what you said originally, which is you have to take the victories that you can get now, and gradually move to the direction that you want to move, and not allow the challenge of economic theory, while we may not have the economic theory to be a direct challenge to capitalism now, that doesn't mean that we stop and stifle any progress towards a more progressive future. It's kind of like you're making good the perfect of the good the enemy of perfect. So let me ask a couple more questions, then I'm gonna let you guys get out of here, and I'm gonna do the same. So I have a question. I have two of my favorite questions so far are coming from a guy named Charles Manson in our chat room. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means anything, but it's worth mentioning. His first question was, do you really think that American electoral politics provides an environment conducive to anti-capitalist politics?
I'll tackle it. Sure, why not? I mean, does any electoral system, you know, I just don't really buy that framework, you know. Mass mobilization and organization, by organizing, you'll open up pockets to create that kind of space.
Okay.
But as I said before, it's going to take work to open those kinds of bubbles and those pockets to rip the party apart. And, you know, we were talking about the generational shifts earlier. When you're looking at a state like New York, where Bernie Sanders is winning over 80%, or Michigan, 86%, Wisconsin in the 80s, you know, the Democratic Party could be a socialist party just based on demographics and this shift alone. But at the same time, it's going to take a lot of work and organization, because obviously there's going to be a ton of pushback.
So you're rejecting the underlying the entire framework because electoral politics at its core is about organizing and numbers and the ability to organize to demand that kind of change. All right, I like that. Emily, did you have anything on that? Because I have another question here from Charles Manson.
Well, I just wanted to say real quick that I think like the view that we can only achieve change through electoral politics, I think is really limiting. Yeah. And so I think like leftists in general sort of need to let themselves out of this box that we can only get anything done by like winning the presidency. There are so many other routes, and one of those is labor organizing, which the DSA does wonders on. So like let go of this idea that like we need to win every office, find the other routes.
You know, I heard about.
And by
Emily.
can I jump in on this real fast?
Go ahead,
so
go ahead.
I'm a labor organizer, and within labor organizing, you're really impacting lives in ways that elections can't even impact lives. So right now we're working for 15 in the union, and the union being the emphasis, but the 15 at the same time, and things like paid sick leave. We're making improvements for tens, hundreds of thousands of people's lives, and those are real wins outside of elections. And I think for leftists, just going into electoral politics, if you don't have the numbers and it's, you know, you're not really invested, it can be a trap. And mobilizing outside of electoral politics, you can still make big wins. And when you're getting those big wins, you're, you know, activating tens of thousands of people, and maybe out of those tens of thousands, maybe 1,000 will join DSA, and that 1,000, you know, who knows what they can do. But as I was saying, just the bubbles in the pockets outside of electoral politics can rip open, you know, things that weren't even imaginable.
Wow. I heard about you too. I heard about Emily and I heard about Larry, and you guys are not disappointing, man. Your reputations are being upheld on this show right here. So last question from Charles Manson. Again, it's a great question, so I have to give him a shout out on his name. Given the privileged position of even the American working class relative to the rest of the world, how can you sell socialism to the American public who benefit from third world labor? And I want to add to it, how can you actually sell it to them when it is going to inevitably cause a strain? So not just on the working class, right? But let's talk about the middle class, the upper middle class. Moving towards socialism not only exposes the reality that we are exploiting third world labor, but it also means that some of the luxuries and some of the structures that we are so comfortable with are going to be done away with. How can we convince the middle class and the working class to let go of the luxuries that come from third world labor that will inevitably hurt, cause us some pain, even if it's only temporary?
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit. So, you know, so for example, the CWA strikes that happened in the Northeast, it's not only national organizing, they do international organizing as well. So when they were threatening to move jobs overseas, CWA sent representatives to, I can't remember the country right now, but also to do organizing there. So not only did CWA win their strike here, they also won benefits. I think it's Indonesia, but you don't quote me on that. But they went there and, you know, they won benefits for Indonesian workers. So it's not, you know, it's more international organizing than just national organizing.
Okay.
Even SEIU does international organizing. It's not like, you know, we're just mobilizing people here and everybody else can, you know, do whatever. We're mobilizing the working class in other countries and making sure that, you know, we're not screwing their workers and vice versa here, and just being on the same page as labor in both countries. So pushing back against ownership, no matter where it is in the globe.
Yep.
Well,
Emily,
and I
I feel like you have
this
something
idea
to say
of
there.
like the but to speak to this idea of like the third world luxuries, I think the people that actually, you know, benefit from, the most from, exploited labor overseas are actually a really small segment of the population. So, most of this outsourced labor that could be brought back home wouldn't actually, up the price that drastically. Like, there was this really douchey article about a restaurant chain in Oregon that was, upping the price of, hamburgers or whatever, and they were including that because, they have to pay their employees a living wage. And it was like a cent, right? So it's like you've got a $50 meal and you're paying 1 cent extra. So, some woman can go home and like actually feed her kids. So I think like the marginal impact of like bringing non-exploitative labor home, I think isn't really as like earth-shattering as people want to believe it is. And I think like in the end, if we get rid of things like the kafala system in the Gulf states, or just general slave labor in India, not only will Americans and like working class Americans included benefit, but also like globally, things will get better.
Yeah. I'm actually tweeting something out here. I'm saying I'm so impressed by Emily and Larry.
I'll jump in for something real fast.
Well, actually, no, I got to say what let me say this. Larry, I put you in my tweet and I said, Larry is okay though. No, go ahead, Larry.
No, I think since we were talking about, the generational shift towards socialism, the labor market for young people is super isolating. And a reason that it's super isolating is because unions in America are super weak right now. And, you see the benefits of, you look at the benefits of what unions won people 30, 40 years ago when unions were stronger. We can win those same kind of fights if younger people, start to organize themselves. And, it's a just thing to do and it's the right thing to do. We don't learn a whole lot about the history of unions in our country and, what they've won and their role in improving the world and improving this nation.
Yeah.
And just activating people saying, unionizing in your workplace is not a bad thing. Yeah. And showing people how to do that is the right thing to do.
You know what? And both of you have hit on this. The answer to that last question, you both have kind of in a roundabout way hit on this. But I want to just bring it out a little bit clearer in this concept of America versus a third world exploitation and our luxuries. You both kind of hit on this. There still is the underlying force of global organizing. And you mentioned the SEIU, the international unions that do that global organizing. But I think we've seen historically a very intentional play by the elite to minimize that sense of international community. And even the premise of the question continues that nationalistic identity over an international identity. And as you said at the beginning, Emily, that socialism should be international in its best format. So I just want to throw that out there because I think that's something that you both were hinting at and kind of alluded to. But I just wanted to make sure to that question we say that, we should look globally and not allow ourselves to be so nationalistic to the detriment of our own best interest at the end of the day. So, all right. So I'm going to let you both get the last word, however you want to give the last word. And then as you give the last word, tell us where we can find out more about the Democratic Socialists of America. And Larry, if you would, I want you to start only because I want you to explain that this is not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not a political party, but it's more of a social movement, organizing movement. Correct me if I'm wrong. Give us the last words and then tell us how to get up with DSA.
Yeah, and just to go back with exploitation, this is a reason why inter-left solidarity against, Clintonism and her militarism is such an important thing. There's a very economic part to what she's doing, and it benefits the ruling class 100%. And a reason why it's important for us to stand up to paramilitarism is because it's exploitative. So, international solidarity is something that we definitely put to the forefront. But yeah, DSA is not a political party. We don't run candidates. There's talk within DSA to potentially, if we were to get powerful enough, as I was saying before, mobilizing millennials and the working class and people of color. If we can get big enough, then maybe we could become that force, but you don't want to stretch yourself too thin and really get invested in things that can burn people out. What was the rest of the question?
Tell us how to get more information on DSA and how we connect with all of you.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about DSA, you can go to dsausa.org, and if you go to the Get Involved, there's a Join Us button. We have, you can join as a student, as a low-income person, or if you're super rich, you can you can help us fund socialism, because as the great Joe Schwartz says, you can't defeat capitalist trash without socialist cash. And if you wanted to reach out to me, I'm on Twitter at Larry Website. I'll DM with you and help you get situated within DSA, or if you need help, you can reach out to the Don Dada of DSA, the real McCoy, David Duhalde. He's our deputy director, and he's on Twitter at don't know. I don't want to screw it up.
Hang on, David.
At David Duhalde. He'll get in touch with you. We're we all start somewhere, and what we like to do is take people that come into our group, quiet people that aren't leaders, and turning every single member that we have into someone that's a leader and someone that can help lead the way, rather than a very, top-down approach. DSA is very decentralized, so everybody has a powerful voice within DSA.
Awesome. Emily, you get the last... go ahead, Larry.
I got to shout out Matt Brunick, Carl Bayer, shout out to Chapo Trap House. That's about all I got.
Yeah, okay, so that was, you broke up, but I heard you say Matt Bruni, Carl Bear, and Chapo Trap House. Shout out to all of you guys. Love all their work. Emily, you get the last word. Matter of fact, you get the last word of the night. I'm not even saying anything else. So when you're done, I'm playing the closing music. What do you have to say?
All right, so no pressure then. So I will just stump a little bit for YDS. So we are the youth version of the DSA. You can find us at ydsusa.org. And I just want to sort of speak to the empowerment of young people getting involved with politics, right? So it's a life-changing thing, and, find the young people in your life and get them out there. It will change them for the better, and I know it's cheesy, but it's awesome. Get involved. And also find me on Twitter at C_M_play. It's like the Pink Floyd song. So come chat, and I'll help you out with finding your voice as a young person. Let's do this, guys. It'll be awesome.
Awesome. And I lied because I forgot to do something first. Okay, so before I do this, Larry, thank you. Emily, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys coming on. But before I sign off, I have to make sure I thank all of my sponsors and all of the people who support the show. So I'm not going to make you sit through that as a tacit endorsement of my show. Thank you guys so much, and love to talk to you more about this next time.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right, folks, that has been Emily Robinson and Larry website. I almost signed off, but if there's ever going to be a chance for us to push back against capitalism, we need money. And I want to thank, since last night, I want to thank, a whole list of names. Hillary, who's a patron now. Plum Jade, who is a patron. John W., who is a patron. Sarah, Wayne, who increased. Wayne has been a patron for a while, but he increased his donation. I almost said Teddy P. Teddy S. Just pledged this evening, and Robin A. pledged just after 10 o'clock while we were in overtime. So I want to thank each of you for being a patron. You guys, for everyone who supports the show, I am doing a bonus show afterwards, and I'll have that uploaded and sent out to you. It's going to be a continuation of this conversation that I just had with Larry. It's just going to be my thoughts on it. But for some of you who've been here for the entire hour and a half, thank you so much. If you can't support financially, click the subscribe button, click the follow button, go to iTunes, give us a review. All those things help out a lot. But if you enjoy the Benjamin Dixon Show, go to patreon.com/the BPD Show and become a patron. And I will see you guys tomorrow night.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.